Hello and welcome. There's a certain kind of professional that haunts the modern workplace. They're praised, they're promoted, and they're seen as the absolute gold standard of a team player. But just beneath that surface, they're on a collision course with a total collapse. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct this very paradox, the burnout performer.
So let's just dive right in. This story almost always starts with success. I want you to picture it. The office is quiet. Pretty much everyone's gone home. But you're still there. You're bathed in the glow of your monitor, just perfecting that one last slide. The demands are relentless, right? You got a global conference call at dawn, a critical report that's due by dusk, and you meet every single one. You're not just a participant in this whole machine, you are the engine. And at this stage, it doesn't even feel like a burden. It feels like purpose.
And this isn't just about showing up, it's about performance. Your output is, well, it's flawless. Your deadlines are sacred. In a world full of variables, you become the one sure thing. And this builds more than just a reputation. It starts to build an identity. When a high-stakes project lands on the table, your name isn't just mentioned, it's the only name mentioned. You are the safety net, and you start to carry the weight of that net with you everywhere you go.
Now, from the outside, this looks like you've reached the summit. Your institutional knowledge is a fortress. Your commitment is absolute. Your team, maybe even your leadership, they say it out loud. We literally couldn't function without you. You're not just a member of the team anymore. You're critical infrastructure. But here's the really dangerous truth. In engineering, we have a name for this. It's called a single point of failure. And what's being celebrated as a badge of honor is actually the system painting a target on your back.
But behind this facade, behind this image of peak performance, there's a disconnect, a growing silent tension that's building between what everyone sees on the outside and what you're actually feeling on the inside. So that latest project is a massive success. But the feeling isn't joy, is it? It's just this brief, hollow silence before the noise of the next demand comes rushing in. The exhaustion is bone deep, a kind of cellular fatigue that a full 8 hours of sleep just can't seem to touch. A cognitive fog starts to descend, making complex thoughts feel like you're wading through mud. And you look at the work that once gave you so much purpose, and you just feel nothing. A profound and frankly terrifying distance.
And this is where we get to the central, really uncomfortable truth of this whole explainer. Our work culture, it has names for this state. We call it ultimate commitment, dedication, being a great team player. But this is a dangerous misdiagnosis. What we're celebrating is not sustainable high performance. It's the exact opposite. It's the final, frantic burst of energy just before a system-wide failure. So, let's put a formal definition on this so we're all on the same page. The burnout performer is a professional whose incredible output is built on a foundation of completely unsustainable effort. I want you to think of it like a high-performance engine that's constantly redlining. Yeah, the speed is thrilling, but you are fundamentally damaging the mechanics. And what makes this so insidious, so tricky, is that the system, the bonuses, the praise, the promotions, is essentially rewarding you for pushing that engine past its breaking point. You are being celebrated for methodically dismantling your own greatest asset, your long-term strategic value. So, how does this happen? The first mistake is to look at the calendar, or the to-do list. The problem isn't logistical, it's psychological. The root cause is actually a cognitive maze that we build for ourselves. And this is what we call the identity trap. You see, this one idea reframes the entire problem. We're not talking about a lack of willpower or a lack in stamina. We're talking about its polar opposite, an excess of it. These are incredibly driven, high-achieving individuals whose internal engine is just stuck in fifth gear. The core flaw isn't a failure to push harder, it's the complete absence of a mechanism, a learned skill, for knowing where and when to stop. And this, right here, leads us to the absolute heart of the issue. The true driver of burnout isn't external. It's not the volume of emails in your inbox or the number of meetings on your schedule. It's an internal process, a slow, silent, and very dangerous fusion between what you do and who you are. Your professional output becomes completely indistinguishable from your personal self-worth. Your value as a human being becomes perilously entangled with your performance as an employee. And this creates a really powerful and really dangerous feedback loop. Every completed project, every thank you from a senior leader, every single time you say yes to another impossible request, it provides this little neurological hit of validation. It reinforces a toxic equation deep in your mind. Worth equals output. And over time, you lose sight of your inherent value as a thinker, as a strategist, as a person. Instead, your worth becomes something you have to re-earn every single day through a relentless display of activity. This whole progression, it usually happens in 3 distinct stages. In stage 1, rest becomes corrupted by guilt. Taking a Saturday off no longer feels like recovery. It just feels like you're falling behind, and it's accompanied by this low-grade anxiety about all those unopened emails. In stage 2, boundaries become synonymous with risk. A manager asks if you can take on just one more thing, and saying no feels less like a valid act of prioritization and more like a career-limiting move that could jeopardize your reputation. And by stage 3, strategy actually gets reinterpreted as failure. The very idea of doing less to achieve more, of delegating, of focusing only on the highest value tasks, is no longer seen as the mark of a senior professional. Internally, it is processed as an admission of personal defeat. Now, this psychological state, it doesn't just stay abstract. It begins to manifest in really tangible ways, with real-world consequences. But the damage isn't some single dramatic event. It's more like a coastline where the constant waves of effort cause a silent, gradual, and irreversible erosion of your most valuable professional assets. So here's the paradox. While you are busier than ever, your actual strategic effectiveness is in a free fall. Just look at the data. The first and biggest casualty is decision quality. Under chronic cognitive load, your prefrontal cortex, your brain's CEO, it just gets exhausted. It stops doing the hard work of deep analysis, and it defaults to mental shortcuts, favoring familiar, low-risk solutions. Next to go is creativity. True innovation requires what we call mental white space, that space to connect disparate ideas. When your brain is constantly just processing tasks, that space vanishes. Then comes patience. Your capacity for empathy and collaboration plummets. You become irritable, a far less effective leader. You're a whirlwind of activity, but your actual impact is shrinking by the day. And this brings us to a really crucial distinction between 2 archetypes. On one hand, you have the burnout performer, who obsesses over being busy. On the other, the strategic performer, who focuses on being effective. One prizes activity, the other prizes leverage. The burnout performer creates a dependency on their own constant manual effort, but the strategic performer, they build systems, scalable processes, clear frameworks, empowered teams that generate value long after they've stepped away. One becomes a bottleneck to growth, the other becomes a force multiplier for the entire organization. And this leads to the ultimate tragic irony. In your relentless quest to become so essential that you are irreplaceable, you end up eroding the very strategic and creative skills that made you so valuable in the first place. Eventually, you just become a high-effort, low-strategy executor. And executors, no matter how hard they work, are always replaceable. Okay, so having defined the problem and its consequences, how do we escape the trap? Well, there are no simple tricks or life hacks here. The solution requires a fundamental upgrade in our professional maturity. It's about a conscious evolution from the burnout performer to what we're going to call the intentional performer. And let's be absolutely crystal clear on this. The goal here is not to work less or to stop being ambitious. That drive is a core part of who you are. The real goal is to take that powerful engine of drive and attach it to a better steering system. It's about a transformation from uncontrolled, reactive effort, kind of like a fire hose whipping around wildly, into focused, intentional, and sustainable performance, more like a laser beam. This transformation is guided by a 5-step framework. And I want you to think of this not as a checklist, but more like you're installing a new mental operating system. Each step is a deliberate practice that's designed to systematically dismantle the flawed logic of the burnout performer and replace it with the architecture of a much more sustainable and far more impactful career. All right, this framework is the absolute core of the solution, so let's walk through each of these 5 shifts in detail. First up, value. The burnout performer equates value with effort. Their metric for a good day is a cleared inbox and a long crossed-off to-do list. The intentional performer redefines value as impact. They ask a different question. What is the one thing I can do this week that will make the other 10 things on my list completely irrelevant? For example, instead of answering 50 customer emails about a confusing feature, they spend 2 days writing one crystal clear knowledge base article that prevents those emails from ever being sent in the first place. That's the shift from effort to impact. Second, boundaries. The burnout performer sees their value in their constant availability. Their boundaries like a fragile wall, easily breached. The intentional performer understands that a boundary is not a wall. It's a strategic filter. It's all about protecting their most valuable asset, their focus. So they might decline 3 low-priority meetings, not to be difficult, but to preserve a 2-hour block of deep work to solve a critical business problem. They learn to say no to the good, to create capacity for the great. Third, we have energy. The burnout performer is obsessed with time management. They use all the productivity hacks to cram more and more into every hour. The intentional performer shifts their focus to energy management. They recognize that, just like a professional athlete, performance requires cycles of intense effort followed by deliberate recovery. They schedule short breaks, they fully disconnect on weekends, and they treat vacation as a non-negotiable part of their performance plan. They understand that rest isn't a reward for hard work, it is the prerequisite for high-quality work. Fourth, identity, and this is probably the most profound shift. The burnout performer's identity is tragically tied to their output. A project delay feels like a personal failing. The intentional performer works deliberately to build an identity that is separate from their work. They cultivate other parts of their life, as a parent, a mentor, an artist, a volunteer. This diversification creates immense psychological resilience. A professional setback is simply a data point to learn from, not an indictment of their core self-worth. And finally, role. The burnout performer gets stuck in the role of the reliable executor. They're the person you call when something is on fire. The intentional performer evolves into the strategic influencer. They don't just put out the fire, they investigate why the fire started and then re-engineer the system to be fireproof. They shift their value from solving today's problem to preventing all of tomorrow's problems. And that is the ultimate evolution of professional maturity.
You see, making this journey from that left column to the right, it's not merely a defensive strategy to avoid a collapse. It is an offensive strategy to unlock a powerful competitive advantage. It's a conscious shift from a career that's defined by exhaustion to one that is defined by clarity. And let's be really clear about the tragedy here. The burnout performer doesn't fail because of a lack of talent or skill or ambition. In fact, it's the exact opposite. This is a trap that disproportionately affects the most capable, the most driven, and the most conscientious people among us. They fail because in a world that fetishizes action, they forget the strategic necessity of inaction. They mistake motion for progress. Their failure is one of omission, the omission of the strategic pause for reflection, for recovery, and for deep, meaningful thinking. And this brings us to what is really the new rule of performance in the knowledge economy. When everyone is busy, the competitive advantage no longer goes to the person who simply works the hardest. The real advantage, it lies in discernment. It is the wisdom to know when to stop, and it's the courage to create the space to think. This is the foundational truth that we have to internalize. No great career, no great company, no great innovation was ever built on a foundation of chronic exhaustion. It is built on clarity of purpose, clarity of priority, and clarity of thought. And that clarity is only possible when we give ourselves the space to achieve it. So I'll leave you with this one question. I want you to look at your week ahead. Find one place. Where can you replace 1 hour of reflexive, automatic doing with 1 hour of strategic thinking? Find that single hour, because that is where your transformation begins.